Welcome into CBS News 24/7. I'm Elizabeth Cook. Let's start with a live look inside the White House, where Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt expected to take the podium in just a few moments to give an update, one day after President Trump's address to Congress. And with severe weather slamming a large swath of the country, the Carolinas just can't catch a break. We'll have a reporter live on the ground in Raleigh with the tornado warnings. Plus, breaking news out of Colorado, where a child that vanished across the country was just found safe 7 years later. But first, we have breaking news. The man intelligence officials say is behind the suicide bombing in 2021 that killed 13 U.S. service members during that military withdrawal from Afghanistan is now on U.S. soil and is facing a judge about an hour from now in Virginia.
3.5 years ago, ISIS terrorists killed 13 American service members and countless others in the Abbey Gate bombing during the disastrous and incompetent withdrawal from Afghanistan. Not that they were withdrawing, it was the way they withdrew. Perhaps the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. Tonight, I am pleased to announce that we have just apprehended the top terrorist responsible for that atrocity. And he is right now on his way here to face the swift sword of American justice.
And this is a view inside that airplane carrying the man back to the United States. That is FBI Director Kash Patel, Attorney General Pam Bondi, National Intelligence Director Tulsi Gabbard, and CIA Director John Ratcliffe in that picture there. So let's get a CBS News Department of Justice correspondent, Scott McFarland. He is live outside that Virginia courthouse. Scott, nearly 4 years later, an arrest. What led up to this?
Yeah, we expect to see this defendant to lay eyes on him mid-afternoon here at the federal courthouse in Alexandria, Virginia, and find out what led up to this arrest, the sequence of events that were there. We know that the Department of Justice is going to seek felony charges, material support of terrorism charges against Sharifullah for his alleged role in the Abbey Gate attack. We also expect they'll seek to hold Sharifullah in pretrial detention nearby to keep him in custody pending future hearings in his case. In an affidavit filed with the court and unsealed at some point during or just after Trump's speech last night, the FBI alleges Sharifullah was in charge of some form of surveillance and route planning for the attack at Abbey Gate, the attack that killed 13 U.S. service members and nearly 170 others in Afghanistan at the Karzai airport there. They're making the argument he was a critical component of that attack. And what's more, Liz, they're also arguing he played roles in other attacks, including at a Moscow nightclub last year and at a U.S. security checkpoint, a military checkpoint in Afghanistan in 2016. All of this is expected to be laid out by prosecutors as they make their case to the magistrate judge here as to why they want Sharifullah held in detention pending trial.
And Scott, we know the Justice Department filed a motion to keep this case sealed. Why is that?
It was noteworthy. That motion was filed over the weekend, at some point just before or just after the arrest was executed. And it should be noted the arrest was executed at Dulles International Airport just down the road. The argument they made was the case needed to be sealed to protect witnesses, to protect evidence, to protect the security of the case. They then filed a motion to unseal it about 48 hours later, either during or just after President Trump's address, giving him the opportunity, deliberately or not, for a moment, a memorable moment during his address to the joint session of Congress.
Scott McFarland live outside that courthouse in Virginia. We're going to be following this case very closely, and we'll check in again with you a little bit later. Thanks so much, Scott. All right, let's shift our monitors back to Capitol Hill now. That address from President Trump last night lasting a grand total of 1 hour and 40 minutes. It was the longest joint session in modern day history, taking the top spot from former President Bill Clinton at 89 minutes. That was back in 2000. And the president touched on a number of topics, including immigration and those sweeping tariffs, and even took a few moments to tout his accomplishments over the last 6 weeks. Take a listen.
Over the past 6 weeks, I have signed nearly 100 executive orders and taken more than 400 executive actions, a record to restore common sense, safety, optimism, and wealth all across our wonderful land. The people elected me to do the job, and I'm doing it. In fact, it has been stated by many that the first month of our presidency, it's our presidency, is the most successful in the history of our nation.
All right, let's go live to the White House now, where CBS News reporter Olivia Rinaldi is standing by. Olivia, some of the headlines out this morning defining that moment as divisive. What was the message and tone from the president?
Well, it was certainly one yesterday of touting his administration's accomplishments while also talking about some of those lightning rod issues for Republicans. You heard the president talking about the anti-trans culture war, issues like DEI, certainly highlighting immigration and his administration's efforts through executive orders to curb people coming across the border. So certainly was a bit of a victory lap just 43 days in from the president talking about what his administration has accomplished. Something that also caught my attention was when he spoke about the CHIPS Act. Now, Liz, this is an bipartisan act that was highly popular, passed in 2022. And what it did was it boosted U.S. semiconductor manufacturing and chip making in the U.S. One, for economic reasons and creating jobs, but two, for national security purposes. Reminder, we rely a lot on Taiwan and other countries for not only the critical minerals to make these chips, but also to develop them and create them themselves before sending them over here. So this was a highly popular, bipartisan piece of legislation that Trump said yesterday he'd like to see it repealed. Also turned around to Speaker Johnson behind him and said not only should he repeal it, but he should use the money from it to pay down the debt from the U.S. that the U.S. is in. So quite notable there that even him talking and taking this victory lap about what his administration has done, also by attacking bipartisan measures that have been very popular from the previous Congress.
And now another big topic the president addressed last night were those tariffs, and we're learning that the president actually spoke with heads of automakers before that address. What more do we know about that?
Yeah, we know he spoke with the heads of Stellantis, Ford, and GM yesterday ahead of that speech. Now, all three of those companies saw their stocks tumble yesterday on the tariff news. Of course, that 25% of tariffs that went into effect on China, or on Canada rather, and Mexico will certainly have an impact on these auto dealers. They know that. Trump spoke with them yesterday. Stellantis specifically said that these tariffs put them at a significant disadvantage against Korean, Japanese, and European automakers. And of course, the car industry is an industry that Trump wooed when he was running for office for this third time. He spent a lot of time, I spent a lot of time with him in Wisconsin and Michigan talking with these auto workers about what their future would look like under a Trump administration. Now they're seeing higher prices to create these cars in the U.S. Certainly a conversation he had with them yesterday, some conversation he's probably going to keep having to have with them as these tariffs remain in place.
And any moment now, we're expecting to hear from the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt in a room just next to you right now. What do you expect the focus of that briefing to be today?
Well, Liz, the focus of that briefing is going to be tariffs, and more tariffs. That will certainly be the topic of conversation today. We know Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said there will be some type of announcement on tariffs. He said that a short while ago on Bloomberg. I'm sure there will be a question about what is that announcement? What will she be saying? What will the president be saying about these tariffs? But what does he need to see from Canada to get these tariffs off of Americans? We've heard from the administration they want to see some action on fentanyl. Well, what does that actually look like? And how much action until these tariffs get taken off? So all sorts of questions that need to be asked specifically about that. I'm sure there will be some recap of the speech last night from President Trump. He has no public events on the schedule today, so we're not expecting to see him, but we will hear from Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, who will certainly be asked a lot of questions about the economic state of Americans currently.
All right, we'll be watching. CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi. Thank you so much, Olivia. All right, speaking of tariffs, take a live look at the Dow as Wall Street appears to be regaining some ground on the hope that President Trump could actually scale back his latest tariffs. Trump's new tariffs on China, Canada, and Mexico prompted a sell-off in the markets this week, with the Dow losing over 1,300 points in just 2 days. Now, the big question is, will the president actually ease up on those 25% tariffs? Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick says Trump could work out a compromise with Canada and Mexico. In fact, in an interview with Bloomberg, he says that compromise could come as soon as today. Take a listen.
And I think early this afternoon we expect to make an announcement. And my thinking is it's going to be somewhere in the middle. So not 100% of all products and not none, somewhere in the middle, because I think Mexico and Canada are trying their best, and let's see where we end up. So I do think somewhere in the middle is a likely outcome.
All right, joining us now live is CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady. Kelly, I know you had a late night last night. Thank you for being with us. What do you make of Letnick's comments about a possible change on Trump's Canada and Mexico tariffs?
Well, I think investors are hoping and praying that we're going to get that announcement today. You mentioned that the Dow was up, but we've been really all over the place. In fact, quite down at one point. So what I make of this is we do know that the president was talking to the major three automakers yesterday. We also know that Canada and Mexico and the U.S. have been talking all yesterday as well to come to some sort of compromise. So there's likely going to be something that the president has seen from Canada or Mexico to pause these tariffs, delay them again, or focus on specific industries. Now, what we have heard Commerce Secretary Letnick say is that maybe the auto industry could be exempt. So you would still see tariffs of 25% on some other areas, but there might be specific industries that could be exempt from those. Where I'm particularly looking would be the auto industry as well as lumber. Remember, that is a big input when we're thinking about home building, which we are short of supply in this country. Also, aluminum and steel. I don't think we'll get an exemption there, just given the president's comments last night during the speech that aluminum and steel tariffs are of utmost importance. And also oil. Remember, we've got that 10% tariff on Canadian energy. And that is an area that really, it's not just what you feel at the gas pump, but it flows through to all sorts of products, getting your goods from one place to another. So I think that's something that investors will be laser focused on as well when that message comes out, if it comes out today.
Yeah, we'll be waiting. But Kelly, I got to talk about China. They're firing back at Trump's move to double down on tariffs on Chinese goods. The Chinese embassy in the U.S. posted to social media saying in part, quote, "If war is what the U.S. wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, we are ready to fight till the end." It's a pretty weighted statement there, Kelly. We don't just rely on China for exports. American companies also do business in China. So it's a complicated relationship. What's at stake when we talk about a trade war with China?
Admittedly, when I saw that post, I went, oh boy, it's not what you want to wake up to, certainly. But look, there are three things that's at stake in a trade war. So it would be higher prices for Americans and Chinese citizens when you just start going tit for tat and slapping tariffs back and forth on each other. It would be potentially tough conditions for American companies that do business in China. So think big names like Tesla, Starbucks, Apple, Nike. Those companies often faced a tough time of it last time around under the first Trump administration when these tariffs were in place. And you also have to think about just the back and forth of where do we go from here. You have these two very major countries that rely on each other economically and sort of setting the tone of, are we going to be in an adversarial tone for the next 4 years, or are we going to come together? So definitely something to watch.
All right, Kelly O'Grady, thank you so much for being with us. Coming up, extreme weather taking aim at the Northeast. We are on the ground in North Carolina as folks there brace for yet another big storm. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Severe weather rolling into New York, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and if you live in one of those cities, brace for sweeping rain and strong winds. And in some parts, officials are urging you to tie down outdoor items like loose lawn chairs and tables so they don't become projectiles. And the Carolinas can't seem to catch a break. Flooding, snow, fires, and now another bout of heavy rain and wind. So let's go to our CBS News national correspondent, Dave Malkoff, who is on the ground there in Raleigh, North Carolina. Dave, many of these folks are still recovering from Hurricane Helene late last year. What are people bracing for this time around?
Yeah, Liz, that was the last time that we had major damage here in the Raleigh area. Most of the damage, as you would remember from Helene, was about 200 miles east of us in the Asheville area. And this storm has pushed through from North Texas all the way through here. We're just seeing the very edge of it. Liz, let me show you this. You see the very edge of the storm? You can actually physically see it there in the sky where it becomes bright. That's the end of it. But when we were in the worst of it, we could actually have a tornado warning that we had just about just north of us in the Wake Forest area when we had a radar indicated rotation in the sky. So right now we are out of the worst of it here in Raleigh, North Carolina. But as you know, this is going to push up the East Coast and it's going to create more of those severe thunderstorm warnings that we are seeing pop up every once in a while. Those tornado warnings have expired. So we're out of the worst of it right here in North Carolina. But Liz, it is kind of neat when you look at the radar and you can see that we're on the back end of it, but then you look at the ground truth and you can look right into the sky and you can see the end of that line. And as that pushes over us, we're going to see some brighter skies here. But if you're living north of us, if you're living in the Washington, D.C. or New York area, you're going to have this coming up towards you in the next throughout the day.
And Dave, you know, that area is no stranger to extreme weather. We've seen that. But what about tornadoes? How common are twisters in that area?
Tornadoes in the past few years, in the past several years, we have seen tornadoes that have popped up in every single U.S. state. We're talking about Hawaii and Alaska. Every single U.S. state has tornadoes. So it's not just Tornado Alley right now, even though we see the bulk of the tornadoes happening in those central states. We do see some evidence of Tornado Alley moving east. And that has something to do with the way the jet stream works and possibly the way that the warm water from the Gulf of Mexico interacts with the cold air from the warm air from the Gulf of Mexico interacting with the cold air from the Rockies. And as those mix together, you're going to see that in the middle of the United States. But a little bit of that is being pushed by the jet stream. So we're seeing a bit of that pushing eastward. So it's not fairly common. It's not as common as it would be in Moore, Oklahoma, here in Raleigh, but we definitely saw that today where we had a radar indicated twisting of the tornado happening just north of us. It doesn't mean that there was definitely a tornado on the ground, but the radar indicated that there was rotation in the air.
Yeah, it's pretty scary stuff. CBS News national correspondent Dave Malkoff, thank you so much, Dave, for that update. I mean, he's in Raleigh, North Carolina. He's saying that much of those scary warnings have passed, but now they're moving to the north. Where's the storm right now?
Well, another thing to mention, too, gosh, he's been live out there for the past hour and a half. And I remember the last time we took him live, there was a tornado warning just north of where he was at. And we were watching these warnings pop up on the map back and forth from the National Weather Service. They usually lasted about 20 to 30 minutes as they would move across. But yeah, there's a lot of rotation. There's a lot of instability in the atmosphere, and we keep a close eye on that. So I want to pull up the map right now just to show you where it's at. We head into the next 24 hours. This exact same system that brings in heavy rain and snow throughout all these states along the East Coast will continue to track offshore as we head into the next 24 hours. But in the meantime, what we're dealing with is severe weather to the south, snow to the north, damaging winds widespread. I mean, it was yesterday we were reporting that over into Texas when this storm originated from there. Now it's continuing to track off east. So as you take a look behind me, I want to time this out for all of us. So we're geared up and ready to go for what's to come, anywhere from Charleston, South Carolina, all the way up into D.C., up into Boston, too. You head into our afternoon hours. This storm continues to bring in heavy amounts of rain and then snow on the back end up into the Great Lakes, pushing off into the northeast as we head into our Thursday morning and Thursday evening forecast. At that point, it does push offshore, leaving behind the leftovers from what we dealt with. Gosh, it was windy conditions. Of course, we were dealing with hail and any sort of thunderstorm activity when it comes to lightning, thunder, and heavy amounts of rain and downpour at times. That enhanced risk ranges from South Carolina all the way up into southern portions of Virginia. And what that means for us is we can see an increased risk of tornado threat throughout this region, where we've already been watching the tornado warnings and watches go back and forth throughout these states. So as we get a quick look at what's to come right around the corner, we can expect anywhere up to around 3 inches of rain just along that coastline as we head south closer to Charleston. But to add to that, we have to mention the snow too. Yesterday, we were reporting anywhere up to around 15 inches. Today, as it continues to move off across the Great Lakes, we can see anywhere up to around 8 inches throughout this afternoon, heading into our forecasted hours tomorrow. Over to you, Liz.
All right, Jess, thanks so much. All right, let's get to some breaking news out of Washington right now. Just moments ago on Truth Social, President Trump sounding off on a conversation he held with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. That was about tariffs. The president says he, quote, told him that many people have died from fentanyl that came through the borders of Canada and Mexico, adding nothing has convinced him that it has stopped. The president says the call ended in a, quote, somewhat friendly manner. We'll continue to monitor updates as they come in. And also moments ago, Vice President J.D. Vance arrived at Laughlin Air Force Base in Eagle Pass, Texas. That's near the border. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and the Director of National Security Tulsi Gabbard will join him there. The goal of their visit, addressing border security. They want to highlight the tougher immigration policies that the White House says has led to fewer illegal crossings and arrests. On the agenda, a tour of the border, a visit to a detention facility, and a roundtable with local, state, and federal officials. Vance, Hegseth, and Gabbard are the highest-ranking members of the Trump administration to visit the border so far during this administration. Meanwhile, the Department of Veterans Affairs could see tens of thousands more layoffs. That's according to a new memo from the agency. It instructs staff to prepare for an agency-wide reorganization. The VA provides health care for retired military members. This new memo says the goal is to return to the agency's 2019 staffing levels of just under 400,000 employees. That would require firing tens of thousands of employees after the VA expanded during the Biden administration. All right, coming up, Trump makes his first address to Congress declaring America is back. He touted his administration's achievements. Our CBS News confirmed team breaking down what the president had to say about Social Security, DOGE, and the Panama Canal. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Turning our monitors now to Capitol Hill. The dust just settling today after President Trump delivered his joint address to a deeply divided Congress. His bipartisan message well received by Republicans. However, Democrats took the opportunity to voice their strong opposition to the president's agenda. Lawmakers held signs that read, "Musk steals, save Medicaid," and lies. Other Democrats wore T-shirts saying, "No kings here." A handful of lawmakers walked out in protest shortly after Trump started speaking. But maybe the biggest moment of the protest came from Texas Congressman Al Green. Green shouted at the president during his speech, raising his cane in Trump's direction. Republicans across the aisle quickly addressed the interruption with USA chants. Sergeants quickly removed the congressman from the chambers. Green clarified his decision to our Nicole Killian just moments ago. Take a listen.
I did it from my heart, and I will suffer whatever the consequences are. But truthfully, I would do it again.
What is your reaction?
I believe that on some issues that impact one's conscience, it is better to stand alone than not stand at all.
We're also hearing from House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. He slammed Republicans and their role in carrying out the Trump agenda. Take a listen to that.
Last night, Donald Trump delivered one of the most divisive speeches made by a president in American history. Republicans aren't trying to bring the country together. They are tearing us apart. Republicans aren't trying to move America forward. They want to turn back the clock.
Now, CBS News congressional correspondent Torian Small joins us now to break down last night for us. Nicole hinted at some disagreement from Democrats, Torian, about how they should have approached last night's address. What are we hearing today and how the party moves forward from this?
Well, it's clear that they're sticking with their messaging. They've been largely ineffective in stymieing any of the legislative priorities of the Republican Congress here, led by the direction of Donald Trump. So they're making it clear that over the next 2 years, right before the midterms, they're going to focus on spotlighting what Donald Trump has done in office and really underscoring the impact, the real world impact that has on Americans, which is why we saw quite a few of them invite federal workers who have been fired to the Hill to be a part of the speech, to listen to the speech as their special guests. Whether or not they have reservations or any regrets about how they approached last night's speech is still to be determined. Leader Jeffries didn't comment on that, saying that he's moving forward with his party on how to effectively combat the president's influence and impact so far.
And Torian, lawmakers today also mourning the loss of Texas Congressman Sylvester Turner. Turner died after attending last night's presidential address. And Congressman Al Green also had this to say about Turner to our Nicole Killian just moments ago. Take a listen to that.
I found myself this morning having to cope with the loss of a friend. Sylvester Turner and I grew up in politics together. It's a great loss.
Were you with him at all last night? Because I know he was at the address. Was there anything unusual?
I didn't find anything unusual. We talked. He was on the floor. I introduced him to someone. I fell to my knees when I heard it this morning. I could not believe it, and I still have problems coping with it. He was a very dear friend, a great person. And it's a big loss, so I'm so sorry.
Very emotional moment there for Al Green. What kind of legacy, Torian, does Turner leave behind?
Well, his passing was certainly sudden and shocking to many members that we talked to across the hour, hearing bipartisan response, sending their condolences to his family, but also honoring his legacy in public service. He was, of course, the 62nd mayor of Houston, Texas. He also served in the state legislature for quite a bit before making his way to the Hill. I should also mention that he is a freshman because he replaced longtime Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who passed away herself in July of last year. So it is news that has rocked this Capitol quite a bit, but also folks back home in Texas. The governor there, Governor Abbott, also released a statement honoring the legacy of Sylvester Turner.
Torian Small live there at the Capitol. Thank you so much, Torian. All right, switching back now to the address last night. President Trump's congressional address to Congress was so long, it made history, and it gave us lots to unpack after a whirlwind 6 weeks in office. Let's bring in Rona Tarrant, the executive editor of CBS News Confirmed. Rona, great to see you. Your team had a late night last night. They spent all night fact-checking President Trump's speech. So let's begin with Trump's claim that millions of people over the age of 100 are receiving Social Security. Let's listen to his remarks from last night, and we'll catch in with you on the other side.
Believe it or not, government databases list 4.7 million Social Security members from people aged 100 to 109 years old. It lists 3.6 million people from ages 110 to 119. I don't know any of them. I know some people that are rather elderly, but not quite that elderly. 3.47 million people from ages 120 to 129.
Millions of people over the age of 100 are receiving Social Security. Rona, what did your team find?
Well, this is something that President Trump and Elon Musk have said for a number of weeks. The idea that there are a lot of people over the age of 100, 120, 150 even, who are receiving Social Security payments. Now, we have been looking into this. There is no evidence for this, and there's a few things to point to here. One, the most recent thing is there was a statement actually from the acting chief of the Social Security Administration. And he said in sort of this long statement, there was one line that was quite interesting. Just because you're in the system for the Social Security Administration does not mean that you're receiving benefits. Now, what that means is they have databases of people everybody who, for example, has received a Social Security number. That does not mean that you're receiving payments. There are also people in the system, for example, who they have no death record on file for, or for some people who were in the system a long time ago, no birth record for. So just because those people are in the system does not necessarily mean they're getting payments. Now, we also kind of digged into a few things. Now, what are the checks and balances in place? They have a system in place where once you pass 115 years old, your payments actually get cut off. We also looked at previous reports from the Office of the Inspector General. Now, their whole job is to figure out waste and abroad in the Social Security Administration. And there was a few interesting things. One is a report from 2023. They said there are around 44,000 people above the age of 100 who are receiving payments. Now, we compare that to the census of 2020, and there are around 80,000 people. So that's very much within that realm. And the final thing to say is it's not that there's no fraud within Social Security. There was a report back in 2024 where they looked at fraud, and they found that, these were payments, about less than 1% of total payments between 2015 and 2022 were fraudulent. We looked for any example in that report that maybe, for example, it was somebody over 150 years old, and we could find no evidence of it. So for that reason, we found that to be false.
All right, well, Elon Musk, Rona, was also in the audience, and Trump thanked him and claimed that DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, has been finding widespread fraud. Let's play back some of his comments on that.
Many more have been found out and exposed and swiftly terminated by a group of very intelligent, mostly young people, headed up by Elon, and we appreciate it. We found hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud.
Rona, your team actually looked into the data surrounding those DOGE cuts. What can you tell us?
So President Trump was claiming there were hundreds of billions of dollars worth of fraud. Now, we have seen no evidence for this. The best insight we have is this DOGE website, and they have a thing called Wall of Receipts, where they're itemizing all of these contracts they say they're cutting. Now, that itemization, it's less than $9 billion, so certainly not hundreds of billions. And even within that $9 billion, there are numerous errors. So the I unit here at CBS and the Confirm team actually dug into this. And we found that, for example, some contracts were counted multiple times, or they were citing incorrect figures. So we know that within that there are numerous errors. So there's no evidence so far that we have seen that they have actually identified hundreds of thousands of dollars or billions of dollars worth of fraud. When the White House was asked about this, the Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said that, they believe that all of these are waste and abuse and fraud, that arguably any of these contracts are a waste of American taxpayer dollars, but none of them actually called out fraud specifically.
We also heard Trump talk about retaking the Panama Canal. This is a goal that he's talked about since the start of his presidency. And he made this claim last night. Let's play back those comments.
The Panama Canal was built by Americans for Americans, not for others, but others could use it. But it was built at tremendous cost of American blood and treasure. 38,000 workers died building the Panama Canal. They died of malaria. They died of snake bites and mosquitoes. Not a nice place to work. They paid them very highly to go there, knowing there was a 25% chance that they would die.
So what did CBS News Confirm find out about that?
So it is true that a large number of people died building the Panama Canal, but historical records don't line up with that 38,000 figure. Now, during the French era of building the Panama Canal, we know around 22,000 workers died. Following that, there was an American-led era of building the Panama Canal. Now, we dug through those historical records last night. We found that on record, around 5,600 workers died during that American era. But they weren't all American. Around 350 of them were American, but a lot of them were from the West Indies. So even if you count up the French era and the American era, it doesn't add up to 38,000, and they certainly weren't all Americans.
Rona Tarrant with CBS News Confirm. Thank you so much for all that hard work last night. Coming up, the White House press secretary gives an update on Trump's talks with automakers. We'll bring that to you coming up. You're watching CBS News 24/7. All right, breaking just moments ago, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt there out with a new statement from the president on his talks with the three largest automakers yesterday. She says the U.S. will give a 1-month exemption from any vehicles coming into the country through the U.S. Mexico-Canada agreement. Press Secretary Leavitt there right now. The president is giving that exemption so that these companies are not at an economic disadvantage. Reciprocal tariffs are still set to go into effect on April 2nd. And we have some more breaking news, this time out of Colorado, where police found a teen who was reported missing in Georgia 7 years ago. They arrested 2 suspects connected to this case. It all started with a trespass call in the outskirts of Denver. Deputies with the Douglas County Sheriff's Office said Rubia Khalid and Elliot Bourgeois illegally entered a property listed for sale. When they arrived, they also found 2 children in a car parked in the driveway. After further investigation of Khalid's active warrant, police determined one of those children was the victim of a kidnapping. All right, a really touching moment from yesterday's address. President Trump highlighted a 13-year-old boy who has survived brain cancer. There he is. DJ Daniel was sitting in the gallery with his dad wearing a Houston police uniform. Trump says DJ always dreamed of being a police officer.
And DJ has been sworn in as an honorary law enforcement officer, actually a number of times. The police love him. The police departments love him. And tonight, DJ, we're going to do you the biggest honor of them all. I am asking our new Secret Service Director, Sean Curran, to officially make you an agent of the United States Secret Service.
Oh boy, everybody had a lump in their throat after this moment. Secret Service Director Sean Curran handed DJ a Secret Service credential. DJ held it up for the crowd to see as his dad held him up. All right, what happens when you combine a mouse with a woolly mammoth? It's not a riddle. This actually happened. We'll introduce you to the woolly mouse when we come back. You're watching CBS News 24/7. All right, now to our Eye on America series. CBS News hearing about your challenges from every corner of our country. The Southern California wildfires that started 8 weeks ago are now over. They killed 29 people, burned 38,000 acres, and destroyed thousands of homes. But as CBS News national environmental correspondent David Schechter reports, the damage to the ocean is just beginning.
The Scripps Institute of Oceanography is where you'll find Danish scientist Rasmus Swailthorpe.
Rasmus Swailthorpe. Sounds like a great seafaring name.
Okay, I haven't heard that one before, but yeah.
Recently, he was aboard this research ship that only goes out every 3 months. They were traveling the coast of California collecting plankton samples, the small organisms that many larger fish live on. But this trip was anything but ordinary.
This is something I've never experienced before, and I don't know anybody else that has.
What they experienced by total coincidence was pulling up to Los Angeles as fire was burning thousands of homes, incinerating plastic, paint, asbestos, and car batteries, and releasing a cloud of toxic ash that settled out over the ocean for 100 miles. Crew members put on masks to protect themselves against the smoke as black ash settled on the ship. And while the plankton they collect is supposed to look like this, instead, the tiny organisms were swimming in ash.
All the organisms that are going to live down on the seabed, they're certainly going to be exposed to this, potentially transporting whatever is in that ash further up the food chain.
Scientists here have been collecting ocean samples for 75 years. These new ash-laden samples will be added to this vast archive.
It's the year 1978?
1978.
Andrew Thompson is a scientist with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
What's the scientific opportunity?
We know what the fish are like under normal circumstances. But the scientific opportunity here is to look at the condition of the fish when they're exposed to all that ash.
Commercial and recreational fishing in California brings in about $1 billion a year and supports 193,000 full and part-time jobs. And while it could take years to know how or if these toxins impact the fish, fishermen and restaurant owners say it's important to know the answer.
That's local Southern California ikejime, dry-aged rockfish.
Michael Cimarosti is the chef at the LA seafood restaurant Providence.
The damage that these fires cause is like woven so deeply into the fabric of our food systems that it's something that, it should be just an absolute red flag for anyone involved. And
red flag for what?
Red flag for change. Like what can be done to ensure that these kinds of fires don't happen again.
Rasmus Swalethorpe says monitoring how ocean life responds will go on for years.
We are also going to be looking for chromium, for mercury.
Things you don't want in the ocean.
Things we don't want in the ocean, yeah.
But because of a grim sort of luck, at least scientists have a head start in knowing exactly what toxins they're looking for. For Eye in America, David Schechter, Los Angeles.
All right, let's get to more news coming out of yesterday's address to Congress between the back and forth between the U.S. and Ukraine. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz said on CBS Mornings, not only has the U.S. paused aid to Ukraine, they also paused intelligence sharing with the country. Take a listen to that.
We are pausing, assessing, looking at everything across our security relationship, number one. Number two, the conversations that we've had, they've been tough. They've been difficult. And I think what Zelensky was used to hearing when he came here was as much as you want, as long as you want.
All right, let's pivot to this story before we take you out about a mouse and the extinct woolly mammoth. When you think of them standing side by side, it would be kind of a classic David and Goliath story in the wild, right? Well, scientists decided, why not bring these two together? Check this out. I bring you the woolly mouse. And right away you notice they have very thick hair. They're also kind of cute. Scientists in Texas decided to genetically modify the mice to express traits once found in ancient creatures like the woolly mammoth. Now, through the process of gene editing, researchers have given the mice long, dense fur similar to the coats of the prehistoric woolly mammoths. The company, Colossal Biosciences, says the experiment is one step towards giving living species more cold-resistant traits. And their ultimate goal is to create mammoth-like elephants that could thrive in Arctic environments. Fascinating, though. Wow. All right, I want to take you now to the waters of New Zealand. A trio of fishermen off the North Island's coast got the surprise of their lives when a 900-pound dolphin jumped aboard their boat. Hey, guys, what's going on? The weight proved too much for just the three of them. They had to drive to the shore where then a tractor helped return the dolphin to the ocean. Quite the sea tale there. All right, looking live at Raleigh, North Carolina, we are following tornado warnings that just expired there. Now they're moving to the north. Severe weather across the country. Stay with us right here. CBS News 24/7 for the very latest.